Back after the breakup, he thought I'd beg again. But watching him lose his career, while I found real love, proved I'd already moved on. I used to believe that Hollywood was built on fairy tales. You grow up watching the silver screen, you see beautiful people falling in love under glowing city lights, and you think, maybe one day, life will feel just like that. For a while, I thought I had it. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm a screenwriter in Los Angeles, 29 years old, still chasing that first big breakthrough. And for years, I told myself I had already found the kind of love everyone else envied. His name was Ethan Blake. To anyone who saw us together, Ethan was flawless. A surgeon at Cedars-Sinai, tall, sharp-jawed, confident. He moved through a room like it belonged to him, and maybe it did. He was the man with answers, with steady hands that could open a body and stitch it back to life. When he smiled, people leaned in. And when he put his hand on my back, guiding me into Hollywood's most expensive restaurants, I could feel strangers staring with that quiet, envious look that said, "She's lucky." In the beginning, I believed it too. Ethan seemed like everything I wasn't. Disciplined where I was scattered, calm where I was nervous, accomplished where I was still struggling. Next to him, I felt chosen. He bought me expensive gifts I could never return in kind, drove me in his black Tesla down Sunset Boulevard, kissed me in doorways like a man who had it all and still wanted me. But here's the part no one sees when the spotlight hits. Illusions glitter the brightest right before they shatter. Behind Ethan's perfect smile was a silence that weighed on me. He didn't ask about my stories, didn't laugh at my jokes, didn't notice when I cried. His gaze was always elsewhere. At his phone, at the next surgery, at the young women. In his department who seemed far too eager to catch his attention. It took me a long time to admit it, but I was lonelier standing beside him than I had ever been on my own. Nights blurred into a routine of waiting for him to come home, staring at the door like a stage set in the dark. And when he did arrive, he smelled of whiskey and exhaustion, his words clipped, his patience gone. Still, I held on. Because that's what you do when you've convinced yourself you're living the dream. You hold on, even as your knuckles bleed. People tell you that in Hollywood, love is just another performance. I didn't want to believe them. Not until the cracks in Ethan's mask began to show, and I realized the man the world admired was nothing like the man I was left alone with every night. And that was just the beginning. Because the more I tried to love him, the more invisible I became. And soon, the very habits he once called clingy, the ones that led me to call, to wait, to care too much, they would be the reason everything between us finally unraveled. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. They weren't thunderclaps or explosions. They were whispers, subtle enough to ignore if you wanted the illusion badly enough. And I did. I used to call Ethan every night he worked late, 9 o'clock sharp, like clockwork. I'd remind him not to drink too much, ask who he was with, laugh nervously while teasing him about pretty nurses chasing after him. At first he would chuckle, kiss the phone, tell me I was cute. But soon, his tone shifted. "Naomi," he snapped once, voice tight with irritation. "Stop checking in like I'm a child. You're suffocating me." The words landed like glass shattering inside my chest. But I apologized anyway, convinced that love meant adjusting myself to fit his moods. I remember one night in Beverly Hills. He was at a dinner with colleagues, and my calls went unanswered. Hours later, I showed up at the restaurant, worried. Something had happened. Ethan was fine, too fine. Surrounded by his peers, his tie loosened, whiskey in hand. When he saw me standing there, relief never touched his face. Only fury. In front of everyone, he said, "Jesus, Naomi, not everything's about you. Can't you let me have one night without being stalked? The table erupted in uncomfortable laughter, but my face burned as if I'd been slapped. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. And then there was Sierra, the young surgical resident with bright eyes and a voice that dripped sugar every time she called him Dr. Blake. I caught her once on the phone late at night, giggling. "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on him for you." I could hear Ethan's low laugh in the background, warm in a way he hadn't been with me in months. I asked him about it. Asked why she was always around, why she messaged him late at night about things that had nothing to do with medicine. His expression went cold, his words like ice. "I hate when people go through my phone. Don't project your insecurities on me. If you can't handle it, maybe this isn't going to work." That was his favorite line. Maybe this isn't going to work. The threat of abandonment hung over me like a storm cloud, and every time I bent lower, tried harder, just to keep the sky from breaking open. The cruelest part was that he always knew how to reel me back in. After every fight, he would soften. For a few days, buy me flowers, take me to dinner. He would kiss my forehead and whisper, "You're the only one." And I, desperate to believe, convinced myself it was true. But deep down I knew better. I could feel it every time his phone buzzed with her name. Every time he dismissed my pain as drama. Every time I stood in a crowded room and realized the man holding my hand wasn't really holding me at all. The red flags weren't hidden. I just painted them white over and over because the alternative, facing the truth, felt too heavy to bear. It wasn't until the breakup that I began to understand just how deeply those cracks had spread. And when Ethan came back months later, drunk and desperate, asking for another chance, I should have walked away. But I didn't, because old habits die hard. And sometimes, the very chains you beg to escape are the ones you slip back into willingly. 3 months. That was how long it took for Ethan to show up at my door again. It was past midnight when I heard the pounding, loud, uneven, desperate. I opened it to find him slumped against the frame, the sharp scent of whiskey clinging to his shirt, his tie hanging loose like he'd fought the night itself and lost. His eyes were red, not from alcohol, but from something else. Regret, maybe, or fear. "Naomi," he rasped, I can't do this without you." I should have shut the door. I should have told him he was right, that we were poisoned together, that I'd learned how to breathe without him. Instead, I froze, staring at the man I had once built my whole world around. The weight of history pressed against me, heavier than logic, heavier than self-preservation. One moment I was shaking my head, whispering no. The next, I was wrapped in his arms, pulled into a kiss that tasted of salt and bourbon and everything I thought I had already buried. That's how it happened. Not with reason, not with promises, just with weakness. The kind of weakness that feels like gravity, dragging you back into the orbit of the very thing that once destroyed you. But something was different. I didn't wait up for him anymore. I didn't call at 9 o'clock. I didn't leave the lights on. I moved like a ghost in our own relationship, present but detached, and that shift unsettled him. One night, he stumbled into the apartment, reeking of alcohol, throwing his coat on the floor like a man picking a fight. "You didn't call me once tonight," he barked, his voice thick with anger. "Do you know how humiliating it is? Everyone else at that table had a girlfriend checking in. Everyone but me. You used to care." I looked at him calmly, almost too calmly, and said, "But wasn't it you who told me I was suffocating you? Wasn't it you who begged me to stop calling?" For a second, his rage cracked. His throat tightened, his jaw went slack, and he stood, there speechless. He didn't expect me to use his own words against him. He didn't expect the woman who once begged for scraps to stand there with nothing left to beg for. That was when I realized something vital. The power had shifted. Not because I wanted it to, but because I no longer cared enough to fight. And that change, my silence, my withdrawal, was about to unravel everything between us. I ended up in Cedars-Sinai again, not because of Ethan this time, but because my body finally gave out. Weeks of long hours in the writer's room, late nights rewriting scripts, and the constant ache of stress had caught up with me. Pneumonia, the doctor said. Nothing fatal, but enough to force me into a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV, alone. The room smelled of antiseptic, sharp and sterile, the kind of smell that makes you feel smaller than you are. I sat there in silence, the cold fluid dripping into my veins, my skin prickling from the chill that spread inward. And that's when I noticed them, the couple in the bed across from me. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, pale from fever. He was even younger, his hands awkward, his hair messy like he'd run straight from work. But his focus was absolute. He draped his jacket over her shoulders, then leaned in so she could rest her head against him. And when she finally drifted off, he held her IV line carefully in his palm, cupping it as if his warmth alone could soften the medicine running into her veins. It was such a small gesture, almost invisible, but I couldn't look away. That was what love was supposed to look like. Not grand declarations or luxury gifts, not apologies that came too late. It was this, quiet, unremarkable devotion. The kind that steadies you in the moments when you are at your weakest. I thought about Ethan. About the night I begged him to stay when my stomach cramps had me curled in a hospital bed. He had glanced at me, his face flat and bored, and said, "You're not dying. Stop being dramatic. Do you know how many patients are waiting for me?" Moments later, Sierra walked in, tugging his sleeve with some trivial problem. He softened instantly, left with her without even glancing back. That memory hit me harder than the fever. I remembered staggering to the bathroom alone, holding on to the walls to keep myself upright, blood dripping from the IV puncture I had pulled out myself. I remembered staring at my reflection, pale and trembling, realizing just how invisible I was to the man I loved. And now, sitting across from a stranger's quiet tenderness, I understood. I had been begging for crumbs from a man who had no intention of feeding me. Hollywood sells illusions. Red carpets, champagne, kisses under neon lights. But under the bright glare of that hospital room, I saw the truth. I was starving in a relationship that had never once nourished me. When the nurse checked my IV, she asked softly, "Are you waiting for someone to come pick you up?" I almost laughed. Once upon a time, I would have said Ethan's name without hesitation. But now, all I could do was shake my head. "No," I told her. "No one's coming." And I meant it. That was the night the mirror shattered for me. The night I stopped confusing control with care, neglect with strength, love with possession. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. Because just as I began to face the truth, someone else stepped back into my life, someone who would turn everything upside down and force me to confront what it really meant to be seen. His name was Lucas Hale. I first met him when he was an intern at the studio where I worked, back when I was still clawing for my place in Hollywood. At the time, I barely noticed him. Just another kid fetching coffee, asking too many questions, laughing too easily. He was the kind of intern who got under your skin, not because he was annoying, but because he was unshakably present. And then, one day, he was gone. Months later, when he walked back into my life, he wasn't the eager intern anymore. He was the new CEO of Hale Pictures, the heir to one of the most powerful production companies in Los Angeles. I didn't believe it at first. The same guy who once spilled latte foam on my script was now wearing a tailored suit, shaking hands with executives who once ignored him. But when he turned toward me, his grin was exactly the same. Wide, irreverent, as if none of the power or money in the world could strip away his boyish charm. "Naomi," he said, "the way you greet someone you never really forgot." Still surviving on black coffee and deadlines? That's how Lucas was. No pretense, no calculation. Just straight to the heart of who you were. He had this way of filling silence that I didn't know I needed. On nights when the city felt too heavy. When Ethan's absence echoed through the walls of my apartment, Lucas would text me at midnight with something ridiculous. Memes, videos of cats falling off tables, a random photo of a cloud he swore looked like Batman. He'd send 6 messages in a row without caring whether I responded, and strangely, I always did. One evening, after a brutal day rewriting dialogue for a film that was going nowhere, I looked out the window and saw a cloud shaped like a dog. Instinctively, I snapped a picture. For the first time in years, I wanted to share something simple, something silly. My thumb hovered over Ethan's name, but the thought of his flat stopped me cold. Instead, I sent it to Lucas. Seconds later, he replied, "Looks exactly like me when I beg for sushi." I laughed, an actual unguarded laugh that startled me. That same week, he sent me a photo of a stray kitten he'd found outside his apartment. A tiny, orange ball of fur, looking lost and confused. "She was abandoned," he wrote. "Guess I'm her dad now. Meet Cleo." I stared at the photo longer than I meant to, smiling without realizing it. Then I typed back, "Kidnapping children. On the streets, huh?" "Bold move," he shot back instantly. "Only the cute ones. Want visitation rights?" It was ridiculous, childish even. But that night, lying in bed with my phone glowing in the dark, I realized I felt lighter, like someone had opened a window in a room I hadn't realized was suffocating me. Lucas didn't ask for my time, he simply gave me his. He didn't demand my attention, he made me want to give it. And in the quiet rhythm of our conversations, I felt something Ethan had never managed to give me, the comfort of being seen. Still, guilt gnawed at me. I was technically still with Ethan, even if only in name. Sharing these small fragments of myself with another man felt like a betrayal. But then, memory struck hard. Ethan laughing with Sierra late at night, reading her messages with a smile. He never gave me. The way he told me I was paranoid, dramatic, unworthy of trust. And I thought, if loyalty means swallowing your own loneliness, then maybe I had already been betrayed long before Lucas ever appeared. That realization terrified me, because it meant I was standing at a crossroads. One path leading back into the prison of Ethan's control, the other into the unknown with Lucas, whose presence felt like sunlight after too many years of shade. I didn't know it yet, but soon, those two paths would collide. And when they did, all the illusions I'd clung to would come crashing down. The night it all came to a head, the rain was falling hard over Los Angeles. The streets glistened with neon reflections, the kind of storm that made the whole city feel like a movie set. Lucas had insisted on driving me home after a late meeting. He parked by my apartment building, pulled out an umbrella, and walked me up to the steps. He was casual, laughing about how his cat had stolen his pillow the night before. His voice, warm and steady, filled the empty space that had once terrified me. And then I saw the headlights. A black Tesla idled at the curb, rain streaking across the windshield like broken glass. The driver's side door opened and Ethan stepped out. His coat was drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like a man carved out of anger, and the storm only sharpened his edges. He didn't carry an umbrella. He didn't need one. Rage was its own armor. He walked straight toward us, eyes locked on Lucas, then on me. His voice, low and cutting, carried through the rain. "Who the hell is he?" I opened my mouth, but my throat tightened. "A colleague," I said quickly. "He just drove me home." Ethan's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with a force that startled me. "Why didn't you answer my texts? Why him? Why do you look so comfortable with him?" His eyes burned into mine, searching for a confession I didn't owe him. I yanked my arm free. Because I didn't see your messages, and because he offered me a ride. That's it. Nothing more. His laugh was bitter, sharp. Don't lie. To me, Naomi, I saw the way he looked at you. I know that look. Something inside me snapped. And what about the way you looked at Sierra? The late-night calls, the car rides home, the way you softened for her in ways you never did for me? Should I believe that meant nothing too? For a moment, silence. His jaw tightened, his breath shallow, his chest rising and falling like a man about to break. That's not the same, he said finally, voice trembling with anger. Yes, it is. My voice was calm, steadier than I expected. You just don't like it when the mirror turns back on you. Ethan's hand trembled at his side, as if torn between reaching for me or striking out at the man beside me. Lucas stepped forward, his voice even but firm. She said it was just a ride. Maybe you should respect her words. Ethan turned to him, eyes narrowing. And who the hell are you? Some intern who thinks buying her coffee makes you worthy. Lucas didn't flinch. I'm someone who knows how to listen. Someone who doesn't make her feel small. That was enough. Ethan lunged forward, his body coiled with fury, but I stepped between them. My chest heaved, rain streaming down my face as I stared at the man I once believed was everything. I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I'm done. The words cut through the storm, louder than thunder. For the first time, I didn't feel fear in his presence. I felt freedom. Ethan's eyes widened, the mask slipping for just a moment. He looked at me as if I had betrayed him in the deepest way possible. His voice cracked when he whispered, "You don't mean that." But I did. For the first time in years, I truly did. I'm done, I repeated, and this time the relief in my chest was undeniable. Ethan stood frozen in the rain, his hands clenched, his face twisted between rage and disbelief. Lucas didn't move either. He just hovered close, as if ready to shield me if Ethan tried anything. I turned away, walking up the steps without looking back. Each step felt like shedding a chain I had dragged for too long. And though I couldn't see him, I could feel Ethan's stare burning into my back, the storm around us nothing compared to the storm that had just begun inside him. It happened only weeks later. I collapsed in the middle of a pitch meeting at the studio, my chest tight, my stomach twisting like a knife was lodged inside me. The room tilted, voices blurred, and by the time I came back to myself, I was already in the passenger seat of Lucas's car. "You're burning up," he said, his hand brushing my forehead. His face was tight with worry, every trace of his usual joking gone. "We're going to the hospital, now." By the time we pulled into Cedars-Sinai, I barely had the strength to protest. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. This was Ethan's hospital, his kingdom. The place where he reigned untouchable. And now here I was, fragile, hooked up to an IV in the very hallways where he still walked like a god. Lucas stayed by my side, quiet but steady, his jacket draped over my shoulders. At some point when the medication made me drowsy, I stirred awake to find my phone in my lap, its screen lit. Dozens of photos had been taken, me asleep, pale, the IV line trailing into my arm. Lucas's reflection was faintly visible in one, his expression tender in a way he hadn't meant me to see. I was about to ask him when the door slammed open. "Ethan." He stood there in his white coat, eyes bloodshot, his chest rising and falling, like he had sprinted from the other side of the building. For a moment, he froze at the sight of Lucas leaning close to me. Then his face twisted into something unrecognizable. "What the hell is this?" His voice cut through the sterile air. "What are you two doing?" Before I could speak, Ethan was across the room, grabbing Lucas by the collar and yanking him away from me. The IV stand rattled, nearly toppling. "You think you can steal her from me? You think she belongs to you?" "Stop it!" I cried, ripping the IV needle from my arm, blood dripping instantly. "Ethan, let him go." But he didn't hear me. Years of contained fury boiled over in an instant. Ethan shoved Lucas against the wall, fists flying. The sound of knuckles against bone echoed down the hall like gunshots. Lucas staggered but fought back, his fist landing square in Ethan's ribs. "She doesn't belong to you," he growled. "She's not a possession." The door flung wider, nurses rushing in, startled patients watching from the corridor. Somewhere in the chaos, I saw Sierra appear, her voice shrill, panicked. "Ethan, stop! This is insane!" She tried to grab his arm, but he shoved her aside so hard she fell against a broken shard of glass from the IV stand, her hand slicing open, blood staining the tiles. The room descended into complete chaos. And then I snapped. I stepped between them, my own blood dripping from my hand where the IV had torn out. "Enough!" My voice cracked like a whip. "Ethan, look at me. Look at what you're doing." For a split second, his fists froze in the air. His gaze landed on me. My trembling hand pressed against the wound, my chest heaving, my eyes steady. Something in him faltered, but I didn't stop. My voice was cold, certain. "I didn't leave you because of him. I left you because I don't love you anymore. Do you understand? Not love, not fear, not jealousy. Nothing. You have nothing left to hold over me." The words seemed to hollow him out. The man who once carried himself like he was unshakable now stood in front of me, broken, his chest heaving, his jaw trembling. He looked at me as if the world had just caved in. Hospital security burst in, pulling them apart, voices shouting about disciplinary action, violations, misconduct. The chaos swirled, but all I felt was silence. Because in that moment, I knew something had ended, not just between Ethan and me, but inside him too. The hospital didn't stay quiet after that night. How could it? A senior surgeon brawling in. The middle of the ward, in front of patients, nurses, and administrators. The story spread like wildfire through every floor, whispered in break rooms, carried down corridors. For years, Ethan had been the golden boy of Cedars-Sinai, polished, disciplined, destined for leadership. Now his name was a scandal muttered in low voices. At first, I thought he'd managed to bury it. Ethan always knew how to perform, how to flash that smile and convince people he had everything under control. But the cracks were too deep this time. The board demanded an inquiry. Security reports were filed. Patients complained about the violent doctor. And for the first time, Ethan couldn't charm his way out. Sierra tried to defend him at first. I saw her in the lobby days later, her hand wrapped in bandages from the glass, telling anyone who would listen that Ethan was under pressure, that he just needed understanding. But her voice was shaky, her eyes darted. Even she couldn't believe the stories she was spinning. Within weeks, she had distanced herself, whispering that maybe she should switch departments. And Ethan? Ethan unraveled. He stopped showing up, for shifts on time. He botched a routine consult, forgetting details he would have once rattled off in his sleep. There were whispers that he'd been drinking during breaks, that his hands trembled before surgery. The same colleagues who once envied him now kept their distance. One afternoon, a friend from the hospital called me. Her voice was careful, hesitant. "Naomi." He resigned, said he couldn't do it anymore. I sat there, staring at the wall. The man who had walked through life like he was invincible, untouchable, had finally collapsed under the weight of his own anger and pride. And the strangest part? I didn't feel satisfaction. Not victory, not revenge. Just a hollow sadness. Because I realized that Ethan hadn't only lost me, he had lost himself. But life doesn't wait for ruins to rebuild. While Ethan was spiraling, Lucas was stepping. Closer, steady and relentless, like the tide. And soon, I would have to face the truth I had been avoiding, that love might still be possible if I was brave enough to let it in. It was late, the kind of Los Angeles night where the city hummed beneath a quiet sky, restless yet oddly calm. I was sitting in Lucas's car outside my apartment, the rain-streaked windows blurring the streetlights into smears of gold. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't heavy, though. It was alive, waiting for something to break it. Lucas drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, then finally turned to me. His voice wasn't playful, not like it usually was when he teased me about coffee orders or cat memes. It was lower, steadier. "Naomi," he said. He was right about one thing. I frowned. "Who?" "Ethan." He met my eyes, unflinching. "He said I looked at you like I wanted something more." And he was right. I did. I do. The words hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened, my throat dry. For a moment, all I could do was stare at him. Lucas wasn't the type to hide. Behind charm, he never had been. But hearing him strip it all down, right there in the quiet of his car, was something different. He leaned closer, his hand brushing the air between us, but never quite touching me. "I've liked you since the first day I met you, Naomi. When I was an intern and you were the only person in that office who treated me like I mattered. I waited. I didn't say anything because I knew you weren't mine to want. But now I need you to know." His honesty was terrifying. Not because I didn't believe him, but because a part of me wanted so badly to lean into it. I shook my head, whispering, "I just walked out of years of chaos. I don't even know if I know how to love without breaking myself in the process." He smiled gently, that same boyish grin that never seemed to change no matter how much power he gained. "Then don't decide right now. Don't promise me anything. Just let me prove it to you. I don't want you because you're broken. I want you because you're you, and I can wait." There was a pause, and then he did something I didn't expect. He leaned in and kissed me. Soft, brief, like a secret pressed against the edge of my lips. It wasn't hungry or demanding. It was patient. A whisper of what could be, not what had to be. "Sorry," he murmured after, his forehead resting against mine. "I couldn't help it. But now you know. I should have pulled back. I should have told him this was too much, too soon. But instead, I found myself frozen, my pulse racing in a way that wasn't fear but something dangerously close to hope. That night, when I finally stepped out of his car, I realized the truth. Love itself wasn't the risk. The real risk was believing I might deserve it again. The last time I saw Ethan, it was almost unrecognizable, both him and the moment. It wasn't in a restaurant full of his colleagues, or under the harsh glare of a hospital ward. It was outside. My apartment, in the middle of another Los Angeles downpour. He stood there soaked, rain dripping down his face, eyes glassy with alcohol and exhaustion. For the first time, there was no arrogance in him, no polished smile, no mask. Just a man stripped bare by regret. "Naomi," he said, his voice cracking like it had been torn in half. "Tell me what I can do. Tell me how to fix it. I'll change. I swear I'll change." I looked at him for a long time. 10 years of memories pressed against my ribs. Late nights waiting by the door, flowers after fights, laughter that always ended too quickly, silences that lasted too long. He had been the sun I once revolved around. But standing there, drenched and broken, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. The sun had burned out. "You can't fix something that's already ashes," I told him softly. "And you can't piece back a mirror that shattered years ago. I don't love you anymore, Ethan, and I don't want to." His face crumpled, like the words themselves were knives. But I didn't flinch. I closed the door gently, leaned against it, and listened to the rain drown out everything else. That was the end. Not with a scream, not with a grand gesture, just a quiet truth spoken at last. 2 weeks later, word spread that Ethan had resigned for good. The man who once looked unstoppable had stepped away, leaving whispers of wasted brilliance behind him. And me? I was at LAX, boarding a flight with Lucas. He reached for my hand, his palm warm, steady, real. As the engines roared and the plane began to rise, I glanced out the window. The city lights glittered below, dazzling but distant. Just another illusion fading into the dark. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who mistook neglect for love, silence for strength. She had died somewhere in that storm. What remained was someone new, someone who finally understood that love is not supposed to hurt. I turned to Lucas, whispered yes when he asked if I was ready, and for the first time in years, I truly was. Because the spotlight had burned out, and in its absence, I had finally found the courage to live in the dark until I chose my own light again. In the end, I learned the hardest truth of all. Sometimes love isn't lost in a single moment. It erodes, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to hold on to. And when the spotlight finally burns out, all you can do is choose whether to stay in the ashes or step into something new. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep bringing you more powerful stories of love, loss, and survival.